The Spanish War of Independence took place on October the 27th of 1807 with the signing of the Treaty of Fontainebleau between France and Spain. The agreement allowed passage of French troops through Spanish territory in order to conquer Portugal, which had refused to obey the order of the Continental System, a foreign policy issued by Napoleon that set an embargo on trading of British goods throughout the continent. Napoleon Bonaparte was given the title of French Emperor in 1804. Charles IV reigned in Spain, although he was more concerned with hunting on his property than government affairs. It was his wife, Maria Luisa, together with Manuel Godoy, Prime Minister, who was in charge of politics. Godoy was not a much liked person in the court, because in addition to ruling over the country, he was said to be Queen Maria Luisa's lover. The king and queen had a son, Fernando, who, according to the king's supporters, was the best option to succeed his father and drive away the interested political party. And the thing is that Godoy was one of the great defenders of the Treaty of Fontainebleau, since once Portugal was invaded, the country would be divided into 3 zones, one of which would be given to the Godoy family under the name of Principality of the Algarbes. But Napoleon's intentions went beyond the conquest of Portugal. He wanted to take advantage of having his troops stationed in Spain and conquer it as well. This can be deduced from the letter Emperor Napoleon sent to his brother Joseph. In March of 1808, before the public unrest, the royal family, advised by Godoy, decided to go to Aranjuez to prepare for a possible exile to the American colonies until everything was over. But the nation was not deceived, and on March 17, 1808, the mutiny of Aranjuez took place. The revolt pursued the dismissal of Godoy and the abdication of Carlos IV in favor of his son Fernando, who became Fernando VII. 2 months after, at the beginning of May 1808, Napoleon forced Fernando VII to abdicate in favor of his father Carlos IV, who also renounced the title and passed it to Napoleon, who then named his brother José I, King of Spain, in what is known as the Abdications of Bayon. This is explained in a letter from Bayon on May 8, 1808, in which we're told the details of the events that unfolded that day. As a consequence of these successions, a political division takes place internally. On the one hand, the afrancesados, supporters of Joseph I and drawn by liberal ideas. On the other, the patriots, opposed to the French military occupation and distinguished by their passion for homeland and nationalism. The war broke out on May 2, 1808. It began with a generalized uprising in Madrid against the occupation of Spain by the French. Marshal Murat, Napoleon's brother-in-law, issues a proclamation threatening anyone who takes arms or forms groups to rebel against the new regime. A day later, on May 3rd, the French troops conduct a tough repression that ends the executions of the 3rd of May. The repression and violence of the fighters is depicted in a series of prints by Goya, named The Disasters of War, as well as many other prints. Gradually, the revolts take place in Burgos and Leon, and the war spreads throughout Spain. The people do not sit on their hands and organize themselves, which eventually leads to the establishment of local juntas to confront the French army. The provincial juntas and the supreme central and governing junta of the kingdom were created later on, which began to take action against the French and to give clear instructions to the citizens, as found in the Spanish Civil Catechism. During the first stage of the war, the Grand Army, led by Napoleon, tries to suppress the entire peninsula and sees its first defeat in the Battle of Bayon. The French are driven to retreat to the Pyrenees. Napoleon arrives in Bayonne on November 2, 1808, and is forced to regroup and reorganize his troops into 2 armies to seize Spain and Portugal. In a letter Napoleon sent to Murat, the French emperor is enraged by the failure of his armies. More than 200 fighters perished in Zaragoza, and part of his army died in Valencia. In the second stage of the war, the tables turn and the French domination begins. The battles of Talavera and Ocaña caused the defeat of the Anglo-Spanish army. Napoleon starts to conquer Spain, and the supreme central and governing junta retreats, first to Seville and then to Cadiz. In 1812, the French domination finally comes to an end. On July 22, 1812, the Battle of Salamanca takes place around the hills of Arapiles, south of Salamanca. Napoleon suffers a great defeat, foreshadowing the end of his supremacy in Europe. The British, Portuguese and Spanish armies, supported by guerrilla forces, managed to repel the French army. In September of that same year, the Cádiz Cortes is assembled, and a constitutional process is set in motion, which led to the preparation and approval of the Spanish Constitution of 1812, commonly known as La Pepa. It proclaims national sovereignty, feudal privileges, separation of powers, national representation in the courts, and recognition of certain individual rights, such as habeas corpus. Napoleon is forced to withdraw tens of thousands of men and send them to support his campaign in Russia, defending France in the European wars. On December the 11th, 1813, Napoleon signs the Treaty of Bayon, which restores Fernando VII and his successors as king and heirs of Spain and the Indies, maintaining the integrity of Spanish territory. At the political level, the war marked the beginning of the end for the old regime, commencing a process that would end 20 years later with the establishment of liberalism. At the economic level, the war was a catastrophe for the Spanish economy. Besides the incredibly high number of human losses, this event meant losses for the agriculture sector, since the fields had labor shortage. In addition to war casualties, the exile of the afrancesados, a group of high cultural level who were forced to cross the Pyrenees to avoid reprisals by the victors, was detrimental. The industry was badly damaged due to the destruction caused by the French and British troops. To the same extent, the destroyed bridges and roads also had a negative impact on trading. Lastly, the war initiated an emancipation process in America, which eventually led to the independence from the former colonies.